I've never met him before his name, but
Good to see you too.
yeah.
Can you see me dance?
Yeah, were you there? You want to do it as a name? Okay.
take care of
Always say second.
row is the first person.
No.
കുഴപ്പമില്ല അങ്ങനെ പറയാം.
Huh? 30 people sang that one night, right? Oh, me too. That's what I'm saying. 30 people. I'm on Central Time. I feel it from naturally. Doesn't feel like I left you. I came in because it's the first time they're doing it in person. I've been very smart. So, since I sleep, only few people have masks on. This happens usually, so I tend to volunteer hours. Because some of you know, because it's
Hi, nice to meet you.
Okay, yeah, she's on her way.
Yes, she's on my
Yeah, she did.
And so, yeah, they're over there, so each one's on five different ones. Such, yeah, we have to keep that, and it's a way for families to understand, so that was the
How are you? Doing good. In my mother, everyone is around 6. Father's side, everyone is kind of around 5. My sister's is here. My sister's daughter is 8. My one girl is 6'4". And they are father's side, things like that there. Son's side, but I'm corner. Same.
No, I forget to.
Come on out. You won't recognize them. You are yeah, the glass is strong.
Well, I just came for this. What do you mean back to Jacksonville? What do I do with my No. This is the first time we're doing in person in 3 years. So I wanted to. Well, it's my passion, it's our baby. So. Good afternoon and welcome everybody. Never needed a mic.
Excuse me. Can we get some attention, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
One is enough, double This is how you get smart as someone else just Yeah. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm so happy to see all of you come here on a Sunday afternoon. But interestingly, in Jacksonville, as we all know, probably this is the time slot we have where we don't have get-togethers, parties, and everything else. But thank you for being here. I'm Kumari, and I would like to invite Dr. Ravi. Many of you might have heard about the classified non-profit organization. And as you will see in just a minute, it's an acting game. It's not as simply a mother sitting at home. It's an acting game for mental well-being awareness. So, and here we are today, the first time in 3 years to do an in-person meeting. And Dr. Ravi and I, and Dr. Meena and some of us who are going to be shortly are the ones who make this team up. And what we stand for, right here, mental well-being. By saying mental illness, happens to not show up. Well, they're not ill. But we are striving towards mental well-being. And it is an outreach. This is outreach we would like to have. And the therapeutic guidance, as we have in the workshop in a few minutes, we will have the guidance by the psychiatrist and the psychologist is our experts in the field. And we all need help and we all need to know. Empathy, not sympathy, is the point word that I would like to use for mental well-being. Resources, Not too many at the state level, but that's what I'm studying. Of course, support system of the other people in the community, besides parents, and challenge. The challenge is both from the mom that is affected as well as the whole family. Rehabilitation and recovery, that is the most important, and we need to keep the goal for that. And of course, we do, because as we see, as we go on to the next slide, we launched this on November 14, 2010. And at that time, most of the Indian immigrants that we came along with us were the ones who were very familiar with it, without realizing, or later on realizing that this is a universal challenge. It is not just limited to immigrants. And then, this is our team. This is Dr. Ravi Pancha. We just had a discussion together, along with Dr. Sojourner here today. There are many unsung heroes. We only have our names up here. And Reena has been an immense help. And Mr. Kishore and Gopinraj are not here today because they've been at the home. And Shankar has been right hand. I'm one of the people who does all the midwifery support for me. And of course, I'm very happy to have Sayed and Dr. Mohit Sharma join our team, and we are growing. Right? Yes. So what started as a discussion has come up to this level, thanks to you all. And we know this. Many years, that's what common. Less, it's not less influence. It is not how to say it's not, it is less accepted by the family and themselves. Now, they can be diagnosed and on the psychiatrist. And why? The reason we focus on me, usually a person between 86 to 24. I don't want to take it to the subject that's going to be discussed. And why? Next slide. So, this is just a brief introduction. This is what the youth is asking for. I have some challenges. I have special needs. I'm an adult with special needs, and I need help. For this, there are nice associations like National Alliance and Academics. And the next slide, please. And what we need is families acceptance first, awareness first, and acceptance. And the next one. This one, how can we all work together by providing effort? We don't need sympathy. We don't need resolutions that others feel that are impossible. And financial support, of course, nothing else about it. However, awareness. Awareness is more important, as important, then comes the acceptance. First, we need to be aware something is going on. And the last one, I'm not even going to address that because it's a very, very well-known fact. Most of us think about what the others think about us than what we think about ourselves. It's unfortunately universal. That is it. And little contribution to this mighty problem is and I would really urge, request, and hope the youth will pick up on these messages and will go forward as parents. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I just want to say one time and then let you go there. This is the problem of everybody, not our individual problem. If you have a abdominal pain, you only know, nobody else. But if we have some problem with thinking, mental illness, you will suffer, your family will suffer, And then in a similar way, the entire society will suffer. As somebody said, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that means everybody in the society are going to suffer. So let's come out with the problem and help each other and give a helping hand to the people who need it the most. Thank you.
I will hand it over to Senator now, Senator Krishna. Speak. I want to refine you. But on the other sides, I only found ideas and they all going to action by the whole country.
And Dr. Kanjan Kumar, and one of Shankar. I'm one of those unsung heroes in the one game and not people. But to start off today's program, I've got a couple of house rules for everyone to start off with. First of all, everyone please put your ringing phones on mute so that no one gets disturbed, right? And also, if you do water over there, anyone thirsty, please feel free, but please be cognizant of the place. Remember to pick it up after you get up and place it the correct place. And then the rest will also be there, anyone needs to please go quietly. Now, since this workshop is about communication, this year we're going to communicate differently. So if everyone can please scan this code with your phone, or if you can't scan the QR code, please visit this website and enter that code, right? With this mode today, we are now going to have you anonymously submit questions. We know in the past we've had people who are shy of asking questions, so this time we want you all to please join in. And we originally thought that the kids and parents should separately, so the parents will be eyeing on the kids will be typing in. So I do request kids and parents do not sit together, please.
I'll be standing there. So
not that close. You can sit farther away. Let it be. Right? So if you can please let your child be free, you be free, and you too can ask everybody. We are live streaming this time. So those who are on live stream, you can also scan this code, submit your questions. It will pop up here. We don't know who's asking, but our panel is going to be answering the questions as much as they can. We'll try and help you get your own questions answered. So please feel free. Any questions, a great question. Do not feel it's a stupid question. Right? That's what you're going to hear a lot. And don't hesitate, because that's what we've seen. People hesitate and they don't want to come up front. So we started this new mode of communicating with you and communicating with us by asking questions. So just to start off, can you switch to the slide please? So if everybody is logged in, I just want to give you an example. So if you logged in, 1 minute. Okay, not this one. Not this one. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So, no. Go to the question answer. Go to the first code, live code, and say live. The first question. Live code is live. No. Oh, I see someone already submitted a question. That's good. So I'm going to keep this live. So anybody after the presentation today, we will see the questions pop up so that the panel can keep answering them. One second. So I'm just going to go back. I'm going to make sure that you all know what's going on or the question you need to answer first. You can start answering it now. A couple of minutes before everyone answers, because the more who answer the same, obviously they want to go. And as parents also participate again. We need so much time because there are many people outside of the actual of this area who may be diving in from somewhere around from. So I'm going to go to the 19. Can you go to the next question, please? The next one. Since today's topic is about communication, I would like to hear what you think, and if you give an answer, you will just pop up. If you don't have one, please. Okay. Right, we'll just get that number to finish talking and then typing and then we'll go to so there's one more question, so you can answer on which is the screen. Okay. Let's move on. here and introduce our speakers, please.
Hello everyone. Before mentioning, thank you all for taking the time to spend your afternoon with us here today. I'd like to introduce our speakers who are professionals. You want me to get up to the stage? Okay, can you see me okay? Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to introduce the professionals, the speakers for this afternoon, who could get valuable time to come here and impart their knowledge that they practice on a daily basis. So first I'd like to welcome Dr. Udit Chauhan. Dr. Chauhan, please. Dr. Chauhan has been working with Mayo Clinic Jacksonville. He's been practicing for more than 20 years. His expertise is in the area of management of mood disorders and augmented machine intelligence for detection of early stage mental health issues. Again, thank you, Dr. Chauhan. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Reena Goel. Dr. Goel. Dr. Goel is practicing at the Baptist Medical Center here. She has over 25 years of experience in practicing psychology, and she works with children, adolescents, and adults. And not only that, she has been volunteering her time and has been involved with Watersky organization for more than 10 years. Thank you so much. If we are ready, Saket, I'd like to let Dr. Chauhan first speak to us.
Thank you. So when I was sitting in the audience, I had a difficult time hearing. What is better, me just talking without this, or me speaking in the mic? What is it? With the mic? With the mic?
Yeah.
Very close. Perfect. Thank you. So, anonymous communication, Dr. Uma just said, isn't this great? And I was thinking it's a double-edged sword. Anonymous communication on social media is a source of a lot of mental wellness being affected, but I guess technology can be used for some benefit also. It was interesting with the last question, overall the theme was mental health and communication. So I will be talking mostly about what is mental health. And then Dr. Goel will be talking about mostly communication amongst other things. All right, next slide. All right. So the first step, of course, is to define what mental wellness is. And this is the WHO definition of mental wellness. It says state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well, and work well, and contribute to their community. And you can immediately see that there are challenges with this, right? Cope with what stressors? Daily stressors of commute, traffic, homework being done on time. Are we talking about pandemics and dealing with those? What stressors are we talking about when we are saying a person's ability to deal with stressors, right? There are layers upon layers of that, and it's a very vague comment. Stress is a very vague term. What might be stressful for me might not be stressful for someone else, while other things might be stressful for others, but might not be stressful for me. Similarly, realize their abilities. Who defines what those abilities are? We define them, parents define them, teachers define them, society defines them. Who gets to define what one's abilities are? My strength might not be someone else's strength, right? This is especially true, I see most of us here, no disrespect to you there in the middle, are from South Asia. So, for us, abilities are almost defined by the society, right? Whenever we are making a decision, there is an added pressure of what would neighbors say, what would uncles and aunts say. So almost there's a sense of ability being defined not just by an individual or a family, but also extended society. So that's a challenge. Learn well. Well, learn what? To play music, to get A's, to be able to draw, to be able to handle politics in the society, in your workplace. So all of these steps, while it's easy to say, it is harder to define what is it that we're talking about. Now, the step back from this is, who is the person, right? In all of these questions that I'm raising, in defining relevance, the most important part is what makes us. Who is this person that we're talking about? The abilities, the stressors, the contribution to society. So what makes us as a human being? Us as in the psychological being that each of us are. So let's start from the beginning. When a child is born, right, there are sensations. So information processing is already there. If a child is hungry, a child will cry, mother will listen to that cry, parents will listen to that cry, and that's essentially conveying some information and processing certain pieces of information. And then each time information is processed, there are memories that get formed. Right? So there are individual memories of our experiences. There are memories that happen from family, right? Families start to tell stories of, the South Asian immigrants like to tell the story to their children. Oh, we came here to this country for your sake. Nothing can be farther from the truth, but that's what they say. So, but there is a story that is being created, a memory that is being created, the sense that somehow there are people who sacrificed to give us a better life, right? So those are, that's an essential part. So information processing, memory formation, and the next part is emotions. And you will see that the next step is mood and how do they differ. So I'm standing here in front of you. Some of you are looking at me in a friendly fashion. Some of you are smirking. It's making me anxious, right? So that's an emotional state. It's happening because I'm interacting with my environment, and I might have memories of actually bombing previous presentations. So I'm nervous, right? So there are emotions, which are a combination of our memories and the current information that we have. Then there is a mood. And the best way to understand mood is, those lights. We have those lights, and nowadays they don't just switch on, switch off. We can regulate, right? We can dim them, we can brighten them. So mood is a more sustained state of that light. There are some people who have an elevated mood at all times. They're more energetic, like we call them high A's. Then there are people who might be more deliberate. They might not feel emotions that intensely. So they have a more sort of steady mood, if you may, or lower on that spectrum. The light is a little bit more dim. They might not experience emotions that intensely. So then we combine all of these. Memories, information processing, mood state, current emotional state, and that leads to behaviors. So when we are asked questions, when we are presented with certain situations, we engage in those situations a certain way. Okay? And I'll explain that with an example in the next slide a little bit. And then all of that combined together forms who we are. Who, in a loose sense, we can call personality, which is essentially having an understanding of who we are and how we think of the world and how the two interact. Okay? So that's the person, that's the wellness part we are talking about. Any or many of these things can be affected, and wellness will not be there. So all of these, they are all interlinked with each other, as you can imagine, right? So let's think of it this way, right? This is the most common example, and Dr. Duell, I apologize for stealing from you. Let's think of 3 kids, okay, who are all going to college, who have gotten similar grades in high school. They come from a similar socio-cultural background. But one of them has constantly heard that they're not good enough, that they have to do more, right? The second one has heard, you're pretty good, just keep working hard, you'll do okay. And the third one has been told, you're amazing, you're the best student ever. Now all 3 of them, so one, right, how many pieces are there? There's a memory, there's a concept of self, there is certain information. Now, all 3 of them are given the same book and given the work to read the book and give a report. The first one takes a look at this book and says, this is too hard. This course is too hard. I can't do it. Drops it. What happened then? So, memories combined with information of that book, plus the self-conceptualization of I am not good enough, led to an emotional state of distress, and a behavior happened of not doing the work. Does that make sense? You see the connection in all of those things? And drops out of the course. While the kid who's always been told is great, he actually spends the next several days playing soccer, and the night before decides he can just hand it in, gets a B, could have gotten better. But similar phenomena, different outcomes, based on personal conceptualizations and things like that. And all of this happens within a social context. None of this is independent of the micro-social environment of your home and the broader social context of the society. So, where does all of this happen? None of it happens in ether. It's not happening somewhere outside. It's all happening within us. And where? In our heart, as most people poets have us believe, or in our liver? No. All this is happening in our brain. It's all a very physical phenomenon, right? Memories are being formed here. Information is being processed there. Sensations are being received there. Thoughts are originating in our brain, emotions are originating in our brain, and the behaviors we are engaging in after processing all of it is all happening in our brain. Two big parts, of course. One is the limbic system, which is the seat of emotions. Various different parts are responsible for receiving information and sensations, and then the cortical area of the brain, which is responsible for processing that information, so making sense of the emotions, of the memories, of the information that's coming in, and deciding on the behavioral pathway, right? So the thoughts and behaviors, they sit in the frontal area of the brain. And what is the smallest unit? And this is a little more technical. If people have questions, they can ask me. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But the singular unit of all of this happening is a neuron, right? Which is a cell in the brain. These multitude of cells, they connect with each other. So electrical signals travel in these cells, and then chemicals get released, and they convey the information further down, and that is how all this is happening. So then there is a question also. We've defined what a person is. We've talked briefly about what wellness is, despite its limitations, right? Whatever definition you pick, it will always be limited. We can't come up with a perfect definition of what wellness is. So when do we decide to get help, and what kind of help? That depends on whether we are in a state of distress or whether we are dealing with a disease. So day to day, we all experience distress, right? As a parent, my teenage girls will listen to me, well, that will cause me distress, and my teenage girls will say my dad is always in a preaching mode, that causes them distress. So some level of worrying, some level of sadness, some level of even happiness or joy. That's normal. That's along expected lines, right? All of us, well, some of us are good at mathematics, some of us are good at science, some get historical information. So that's easy for us. Other things might be more challenging, but that's still manageable. We don't necessarily need help to manage those things. And the second part is somewhere in the middle, and that's where science of psychiatry fails and the art begins, right? As to where that distress part is. So essentially, all the things that I've talked about, whether it be challenges of life, challenges of communication, poverty, social media related problems, whatever, pandemic related challenges, if the distress is such that it is affecting your well-being or a sense of wellness, you are feeling sad and down, and it is somewhat affecting your functioning, but it's not bad enough, and this is where the challenges are, but not bad enough to significantly affect us. You're still able to perform, you're still able to function, and with usual supports from family, friends, someone giving you some healthy advice, you're able to handle those things. But that's the domain of distress. When does this become disease? You truly, really should get help, and we'll talk about what kind of help there are. One, whatever mood state you are in, remember, I'm not really using emotions, I'm using mood state. Whatever mood state you are in, or whatever thought problems you're having, one, if it's persistent, day after day, most of the time you look at psychiatric diagnosis, they will have some time frame for that. They say if you're persistently sad for 2 weeks, if you are persistently having problems thinking clearly for a month. So one of the key features is that it is not something that comes and goes for brief periods of time. It's something that is persistent. It is pervasive. It's affecting all aspects of your life. So, I'm home and I'm having problems at home and I'm distressed at home, but when I go to work and enjoy my life, I love my colleagues, I'm actually in a good mood, or vice versa, most likely it's not a disease. Right? Disease doesn't present in one environment, it doesn't present in another. So there has to be pervasiveness. And I threw in the word peculiar there because sometimes it's not just the usual state of way of thinking. So in more serious illnesses, especially thought disorders, people can develop peculiar ways of thinking. They might become extremely suspicious that there are people following me, someone's keeping an eye on me, there is a conspiracy to harm me in some way, or the thoughts actually might stop coming, which we say positive thoughts. A person might be sitting, you might ask them questions, they might not be able to respond, or the thoughts might be crowded. There's so many thoughts that a person is not able to express them. And these are all related to, again, thought changes, emotional changes, mood-related changes. They can be difficulties with information processing. So different aspects, right? So again, just to throw out some of the names there, so you can imagine there are problems with information processing. People can have learning disorders, ADHD, which in part is an information processing issue. Dyslexia, when people develop memory problems that are pervasive and persistent, dementia, thought disorders, schizophrenia is the most common one. And then, of course, I put in a broad rubric of emotions, although technically we divide them into mood and anxiety disorders, but ultimately they're all issues related to mood and emotions. So anxiety disorders, bipolar mood disorder. And I'm happy to answer questions about these things if someone has specific questions, but I'm not really put in a lot of details. And then, of course, if a person is not able to form a very stable and healthy sense of self, people can have personality disorders. And again, as I said, the ultimate unit of all of this is a neuron. So all of this happens in neurons and synapses. So ultimately, the sum total is some kind of a complex interaction between our genes that we are born with, the environment that we interact with, and then of course the changes in our brain that can happen with aging and such. So complex interaction of those things leads to disease or mental illnesses. So that's where I will stop, and I will hand it to Dr. Goyal to take it from there.
Thank you, Dr. John. I think that's my last slide. Thank you. It's a great honor and privilege to be here today to be able to speak about these very, very critical and important topics. Dr. John has done an exemplary job explaining mental illness, and that's been one of the most important components of Mother's Pride, and our goal is to raise awareness of mental health issues, particularly in the South Asian community, but all across in all communities. And to destigmatize it, that getting help, getting assistance, understanding that the brain is an organ, just like any other organ, and that it's okay to get help. And I think Dr. John did a great job explaining how that works, so that hopefully we can take away from that we do need to take care of our brains as same way we take care of our hearts or any other organs in our body. One of the other main objectives, I think, of Mother's Pride has always been to try to bridge the gap between parents and children and to improve communication. Different generations, different cultures, people from different backgrounds, or children are being raised in a different world than they are. And so how do we bridge the gap between the two? And today I'm going to speak to you about communication, and hopefully we'll have some time to get to some coping mechanisms. Today's session, I'm going to address both parents and children. I feel very strongly that we are all a team in the sight of that. So by no means is this something that parents are doing wrong. I think both parents and children can learn from one another to try to improve the communication
Just to give you a little idea of why this is so important. So the NIH has done some studies, that's the National Institute of Health, and they have determined that in the United States, 22.8% of adults suffer from some form of mental illness, and 49.5% of adolescents, which is children aged 13 to 18, suffer from mental illness as well. Now, this is on a very broad continuum. So it can be anything from a more mild form of mental illness to very severe psychiatric conditions. But it's very significant to note what I feel I'm seeing in the community. I have had the privilege of working within the same community for most of my career. So really seeing what the changes are, just objectively, and who I see, and what's coming into my office, what are people looking for help in. And there's definitely been a lot of increase in anxiety and depression in our community, in our society, and I think overall in our world. There are many hypotheses on why that's happening. There's lots of studies on understanding the causes of that. And I'm going to speak to just what I think is something that we can affect change on at a basic level, and that is the communication piece. So just to speak to the anxiety in America, 19.1% of adults have reported anxiety, and these are just reported cases, and 31.9% of adolescents, and that's again between the ages of 13 and 18. And in terms of depression, we're looking at 18.4% of adults and 17% of adolescents. But again, adolescents are the most common report, and it is very significant to look at the next statistic, which says that more than 3,000 teens in the United States think about suicide on a daily basis. That is absolutely astounding, I think. It's very significant. Not that they are necessarily committing suicide in their brain, but they are thinking about it. So this is how intense this problem is, and how intensely they're feeling the stressors of life and the capacity to manage them. There's been a 40% increase in depression in teens since 2005. So we really have to kind of pause and see how can we help as a family system, as a community, as a society to try to manage this problem. Communication, and especially effective communication, is extremely important. Communication leads to understanding, respect, trust, and very importantly, self-esteem, which Dr. John he termed as sense of self, which is basically what I'm also referring to. Effective communication between parents and children is so critical. When we do not listen to each other, we fail to respect one another, we fail to trust each other. When someone simply listens, it makes such a difference in our respect for them, and therefore we are more likely to consider what they're saying. So we're not talking about this one extreme of parents telling kids or kids telling parents, parents saying you have to do this, and kids saying, no, I'm absolutely not going to. I think it works both ways. We do have to listen to one another, because both of you, parents and kids, each have the same goal in mind. We all want to be healthy, happy, successful people in the world. So how do we get here without fighting it? So that's why it's so absolutely important. Also, when we do not listen to one another, it really undermines the development of self-esteem. So I showed you the statistics on the age range, which is 13 to 18. Psychologist Gary Anderson actually went through stages of life, and he's talked about what happens in each stage of life. And at that stage of life, that 12 to 18 is a very crucial part of development. The brains are developing, and children are at that point forming their sense of self, but also it's the time when you're trying to understand who you are in the world. What is your role? How do you fit in? And you're trying to establish independence. So when you think about that developmental stage, and that's where we're seeing so much breakdown, it really becomes significant to find a different way to communicate to our children. Because I think that's one thing that we can do to improve the chances of lowering distress and lowering anxiety, and helping our kids and our parents, kids helping our parents manage the life stressors. There are several barriers to effective communication. Of course, age. I think as parents, we feel that we've been through adolescence, we've been through all of the stages. We know exactly how it feels and what to do and what's going on. And something's happening with our child, and the impulse says, oh, when I was growing up, when I was, I went through this. We are great at problem solving for our kids. Because, when we get them, they're infants, they are completely dependent on us, and we just want to keep them safe. So we're problem solvers. Don't tie balls, don't put your hand in the socket, stay away from the flame. And we can keep them safe, we can take care of them. But then they reach the stage where they're looking for independence, and they're trying to figure out how to function, and we're saying, no, don't do that, no, do this, don't do that. And I think it is one of the quickest ways to shut down communication is by trying to problem solve. We need to allow our kids the opportunity to express themselves, ask them what they think they need to do, and that in turn will then promote, I think, some good self-confidence as well, because there's nothing worse than self-doubt, and I think so many times we have potentially create that inertia by trying to solve the problems, we're telling them that we know better. I know as a child, I never liked to hear that, when my parents were growing up, and it's like, oh God, here we go again. You don't know how it feels, because frankly, I think the world, obviously every generation is different, but I believe that the world has changed so drastically in just the past 15 years, and very quickly. I have 3 children. My oldest is a daughter, she's almost 25, and I have 2 boys, 20 and 16. And I can tell you, as a parent, how different my daughter's life is from my son's life, just in terms of what they are exposed to, and that's just an 8-year difference, and I can see that. There are some things that never change, but I do think that we have to be more understanding about that difference and how to help them learn to interact in the world. Of course, any one of these topics, I feel like it's a whole talk in itself. So I'm just kind of touching on the key points. Cultural differences, and we're all very aware of the cultural differences that, especially parents from South Asia, have grown up in extremely different culture. Language can be a barrier. Power imbalances can be a barrier. I'm a parent with a child, this is what you do. And you have to do it. Parents say, no, I'm going to play video games all day, no, you're going to study, and you're going to do this. And that really creates a lot of breakdown for communication between parents and children. And I'm going to speak a little bit to emotional barriers as well, which Dr. Chupin touched on. I think as parents, someone's getting the call. Is that yours?
No, it's not.
Yours?
No, it's not, but who's ever takes this? It's not that now.
So what are emotional barriers? And I think, I'm trying to think of that first slide up where everyone was talking about breakdowns in communication. But when you all were talking, I think you were speaking to a lot of very significant issues. And one of them is actually the slide where you pulled the audience. I don't know if that's possible. It's okay if it's not. So one of the big ones, I think, is emotional barriers. So what happens, as Dr. Chupin described, we have an event happen, and something goes on outside, it creates a stressor in us, and that creates an emotional response. So, for example, I think for a lot of parents, fear is one of those emotional responses. We then have a child says, hey, I want to go to some concert downtown Jacksonville. This creates a sense of fear in the parents, and then parents react from that place. Oh my gosh, you can't go. So, we start to engage in that. Child can perceive that in many ways. Most of all, my parents don't trust me, they don't have faith in me, they think I'm stupid, whatever those thought processes might be, it immediately causes a shutdown completely. Because parents coming from a place of fear and reacting not to what's happening with the child, but we end up reacting to our own fears. So I can tell you, I myself have experienced that. I'm a psychologist, a cool mom, but I think I am. I said to one of my kids, they went to a party in high school, and I said, no, I do not want you to drink. I prefer if you do not, but I understand there's going to be alcohol here. If you happen to drink, please don't drive, call me. Anytime, call me, I will come pick you up. And my son looked at me and he started to laugh. And he goes, I am not calling you. I am absolutely not doing that. Not at all. And there was a resounding, me neither from the other. So, what? I'm so understanding and I'm so loving and you guys are what you mean. And what they said was, I don't think it'd be worth everything you have to hear on the car ride home. Because I do come from a place of reactivity. Oh my God, you did it. And come back to it. But you know, that reactivity initially, I had to do that. It really just shuts down the communication. And they told me straight up, sorry, we're not wrong. So I've been working on that with myself. I think that's so very important to know because I think there is such a fear of what might happen to our children because we are hardwired to protect them and take care of them and we want the best for them. But when we come from those places of assuming the worst, assuming they can't take care of themselves, and basically from fear, we really do react from that place, and I think it exacerbates it prevents all of those other things that we want to develop. The understanding gets tainted, the respect gets tainted, the trust gets tainted, and that thereby the self-esteem also gets tainted. So I just think that's just such a very important component of communicating effectively. Active listening. How do you actively listen? This is the way to actively listen, and it's hard because we have to manage our own emotions and not project them onto our kids. But when we actively listen to them, it opens them up to share problems. And at the end of the day, that is what we want. We want them to trust us. We want to be able to trust them. So kids, also listen to your parents, because we do need to come from a place of empathy from one another. And we do have to understand where our parents are coming from. I think we start to assume the worst of each other. They're not going to let me, they're so mean, whatever that is. And then we're like, I'm not even going to ask. I'm going to sneak out or I'll find a way. And that is something that we really want to try to help each other, because again, we are on the same team. Empathy, again, understanding one another, not assuming the worst of our parents not assuming the worst case scenario with their kids. And again, I know all these things are so challenging in that moment, because the emotion gets kicked out, and there's such a tendency to come from that emotional place. So it really takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of slowing down and responding to one another and not just reacting. Clear communication is important because at the end of the day, we can listen to our kids and we can open ourselves up, but we also do need to guide them. We do need to provide limits. We do need to provide boundaries. So it is very important to clearly communicate your expectations with your children in terms of these things, for your children to be able to collaborate with you and discuss that with you so that you understand where each of you is coming from. You might not always agree, and that's okay, but it's about keeping the communication open. And creating time and space, because our lives are extremely busy. I think all day long we can be around one another, but if we're not present in a moment with one another, and present means maybe phones can put away, maybe our thoughts are more focused on where we are versus thinking about our to-do lists, and really engage with our kids. And again, I have experienced that firsthand with my kids saying, hey mom, I need you to listen. I'm like, I'm listening, and I'm looking right at them, and they're like, no, I need to really listen, because it's true, I'm thinking 5 steps ahead, maybe all the things I need to do. So it's so important for your kids to know that you're actively listening, and you want to hear them. And these are small things, I think a lot of times that we can do, but again, because we come from such an emotionally reactive place, we often tend to not incorporate that into our interactions. Again, I groups of things, but just trying to give everyone an overview and give some points to think about and build on. And this again addresses more of the day-to-day things that we might experience, and not necessarily addressing intent or more severe psychiatric illness. This is not the only solution. This is a big piece of the puzzle that I think we can manage to create best possible possibility for greatest outcome in our interactions and in our children's lives. And of course, psychiatry medication has such an important component depending on the severity of illness, and so it really is an entire puzzle, and every piece has to be addressed and looked at. So I just gave you an overview of one component of it, and I'm going to ask Dr. Shahan to come back and speak on another very important component, which is when to recognize when you need more. When you need more help, and perhaps you need medications. Dr. Shahan. Thank you.
So I'll not wait for the presentation. I'm actually not going to use the presentation because we are running a little bit behind. So I'll just spend a couple of quick minutes because I really want people to engage, right, and ask questions. So, I started my presentation by pointing out that there's a complex interaction of thoughts which happen in one part of the brain, emotions that happen in another part of the brain, memory that happens in another part of the brain, information that we collect, part of it comes from our memories, part of it comes from what is happening around us, and then sort of an amalgamation of all those things. And you can think of the brain almost like a collection of multiple organs clumped together. So they are specialized areas doing specialized things, and they all talk to each other in a complex fashion. So let's say that something bad happens and I'm sad and it's an expected reaction. But let's say that something happens and I'm sad and that sadness never leaves. I'm persistently now feeling sad and down. That mood will change how I think, right? So now I'm not a negative person, but because I'm feeling persistently sad, my thoughts change. Right? People are not listening to me, my boss is mean to me, my coworkers are not helping me like they used to. So suddenly, now there becomes a feedback loop. Now these thoughts are changing my mood, but the starting part was an illness in my brain because of chemical imbalance, because of which I was persistently feeling sad. Now the same thing can happen from the other place. So the thought area of the brain can get an illness, schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia. I start by having thoughts that people are against me, and that people are trying to kill me, or harm me, or following me. Of course, if I'm having those thoughts, I'm going to feel distress. I'll be scared and nervous. So it's all connected to each other. In mood states and thought states, the other interesting part is if I'm persistently feeling sad, I even reinterpret my memories. Even the memories that I will think about will be negative memories, right? I will reinterpret them. I'll think of them differently. Same with thought states. The point I'm trying to make is that what Dr. Gold talked about was in the realm of day-to-day distress and how to reduce it. In a disease perspective, if I'm overweight, I'm more likely to develop diabetes and high blood pressure. So if I'm having conflict on a daily basis with my family, with my peers, if I'm struggling in school, then I'm more likely to get a disease of mental illness. So those things are important for prevention. For distress, there is a psychotherapy piece where the reason, I believe one of the reasons for stigma about mental health is this. We can self-regulate our thoughts and emotions and behaviors up to a certain extent. And so when we start to lose that control, it's scary, right? If we don't have control over those things, there can be nothing more scary than that. And so we really don't want to believe that we can somehow lose control of our emotions and thoughts and behaviors, and scary because it's scary, there's stigma. The more fearful we are of something, we tend to develop a greater stigma. So there comes a time when these things are not in our control. We cannot think our way out of it. We can't think our way or behave our way out of how distressed we are feeling. And that's when medications are required. They all work by changing the neurochemistry of the brain. They might increase certain neurochemicals in the brain, they might decrease certain neurochemicals in the brain, but essentially that's the mechanism of action. Having the disease, as Dr. Goel aptly put, brain is an organ, just like any other organ. This poor thing has got every right to be as sick as any other organ. And we will be okay with telling people, oh, I've got this heart disease, I've got this liver disease, my kidneys are not working, but we never ever say our brain is not working, especially the emotional areas of our brain. And the poor thing has got a right to be sick, and when sick, there are treatments available for it. It doesn't make you weak, right? It simply means there is a disease that needs treatment. That's all there is to it. So that's the most important message that I want to convey. Now, some people also think of, if I get on these medications, I will never get off. That's only a partial myth. There are some illnesses, just like physical illness. If you have diabetes, you're not coming off medications, right? You're going to be on insulin or medications all your life. So there are certain psychiatric illnesses, like schizophrenia, which are lifelong illnesses. You need treatment for your life. But many psychiatric illnesses, like anxiety disorders, major depression, it gets better and you can actually come off the medication. So it's not a lifelong thing necessarily all the time. The third one that I hear very commonly is that, oh, they're addictive. You get hooked with them. Again, partial truth. Some of them are. They are not used for long periods of time. They're only used temporarily. But the majority of psychiatric medications are not metformin. So I'll just stop there and I'll open it up to questions. You're using slide version.
So why don't we answer your questions, right?
Well, so let's just take a quick poll. How many here are adults? Because some of the moms are related to school. How many parents we have here? Can you say, raise our hands? How many kids? Okay. So we have an idea of doing a breakout session where we have the kids in one room with Dr. Goel and the adults in another room with Dr. Chauhan. Rahul, you are still good with the breakout?
I was told because we're doing Slido, I think it's
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So we can still do that. So what we are going to do is we are going to open up for questions with Dr. Chauhan and Dr. Goel. Before we do that, I'd like to take a minute to introduce another young lady who's here with us. That's Ms. Ashna Shah. Please come up. Ashna is a 11th grader at TV High School. She is also the first Indian origin girl who is Miss Florida's outstanding team. Please come.
Hi everyone, how are you doing today? Good. I'm glad. I just wanted to come over here and talk a little bit about my experiences with mental health and learning disabilities. In 8th grade, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, ADHD, and anxiety. And that was very hard for me, especially coming from an Indian household where we don't talk about learning disabilities and we don't talk about mental health very often. So when I was diagnosed, my first question was, is there a cure? What can I do to cure these things? And I soon learned, you can't cure dyslexia. Learn how to manage your anxiety. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey with these learning disabilities and this mental health journey that I've been through, because I think that what we need to start doing in our community, in our society, is instilling awareness in our youth. I think that if I had known at a younger age about anxiety, I would be able to pick up on things faster and learn how to cope with my anxiety a lot faster. There were small things growing up that aren't really normal. I used to always want a block of wood in the car because I would always think, oh my goodness, like something bad's gonna happen, I need to knock on wood, but there was never wood in the car. So I asked my parents to get a block of wood in the car. And I didn't really notice that that was a sign of anxiety. I would be so anxious that I would have my parents get a block of wood in the car, or we have to stop and find wood so I can knock on it because I thought something bad was going to happen. And so after I was diagnosed, I told my cognitive behavioral therapist about that, and she was like, well, that's definitely anxiety. We can fix that, or we can manage that. And so now I've gone from knocking on a block of wood in the car to knocking on my head, and now to tapping on my fingers. And it's helped a lot. I think that we need to focus on finding the small things when we're young and working on it as you grow up. And, Dr. Boyle here helped me a lot when I was first diagnosed. I didn't know what to do for myself. Getting accommodations in school, the extra time, the extra help that you need is very difficult. So, having someone there who's been through it is really helpful. So, any of you all are young or getting tested, please reach out to someone who does have a learning disability or something with mental health, because they can help you a lot. And that's a little bit about my journey. And I'm so glad that everyone's here to learn more about mental health.
Thank you, Ashwin, for sharing that. Dr. Chauhan, I think what we can do is, I still want to make the kids comfortable. So we have a breakout session over there. After work, we have a room for the young children. And then Chauhan can stay here. He's going to take the questions from the parents. And Dr. Goyal is going to interact with the children. So we have a breakout session back there. What we're going to do is 3:50 right now. We'll take a 30-minute session, 3:45, and then come back, and then we can take some finals and questions. Thank you. So, please, if you can go to the room next door. Saket, can you show where they can go?
So I do want to thank Ashna for coming up here and sharing her story. That takes incredible courage to be able to talk about the challenges and how to achieve our goals. So that's awesome. All right. Would all of you want to come up? Come closer, perhaps? We need you.
आगे जाना है या यहीं बढ़ना है? ओके, यहीं से
Are we doing questions to slide or yeah? Okay. Or can we slide some of your questions? All those questions seem like questions for Dr. Boyle. I can try. We'll see. So are these the questions here? Am I supposed to answer these?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's take one at a time here. So the question is, I'm feeling so left out here. How to communicate to a child who cannot manage stress? How do you stay calm when someone is really anxious and throw things at you? It is difficult to stay calm with people at point. Hopefully that's not happening. So look, I think Dr. Boyle pointed out, and I will elaborate on some of these things. The first thing she said was listen. What does that mean? Let me use the example of me as a cab driver at this time. So when my daughters are telling me a distressing story, I have now developed the habit of saying, are you venting or are you looking for a solution? Because then my approach to that problem changes, right? 9 times out of 10, they're like, no, we can handle it. We're not looking for a solution. We just want to share, right? Something that's struggling. So that's one. 2, it was funny, I'm sure it was one of the kids. In the challenges with communication, the kids said, bad grammar, wrong words. Well, that's a challenge for most of us. English is a second language. And it is very true. that what we are saying, we mean something entirely different than what our children are listening. Part of it is language. Part of it is also culture, right? So again, in my household, I have two twin teenage daughters, and you can all sympathize with me. But it's fascinating that even if we are saying things from our perspective that are very polite and kind, and they're like, you're being so mean. You don't know what mean is, you know. So it's our perspective of what is mean in terms of the words is so different than their perspective of what mean is. So I guess learning the emotive language of how to convey what we are trying to convey as parents is another important thing. I don't know where the resources for that are, but most of the time what works is starting by saying what you are feeling rather than what you're trying to, having them do. So you say, okay, you're sharing this story to me, that's making me very nervous, that's making me very sad, that's upsetting. And then they respond better to that. That's one communication skill that can be used. So first one was, are you listening to the venting or are you problem solving? 2, expressing your own emotional distress rather than telling. 3rd is eliciting from them what they would want to do in a particular situation, right? So, okay, what I'm hearing is such and such is happening. You are distressed by it. What do you think is the solution to the problem? Because you really don't, you haven't gone to school here, you haven't, you don't really know what's happening. I mean, even if you have gone to school, so you don't know what is happening in school, right? And so letting them come up with solutions because they know what is happening in their schools and in their microculture will be helpful. So those are sort of some of the common strategies that can help you communicate that. All right. What if a person is unwilling, resistant to accepting or even acknowledging their mental disorder, even with close mental disorders? That one is okay. So loss of insight is the biggest challenge in serious psychiatric process. The self-awareness that I have lost control over my thoughts or my emotions is a symptom of some of the most serious psychiatric illnesses. So if someone has severe bipolar mood disorder, they might acknowledge that they are in trouble when they're depressed, but when they're manic, they're extremely happy, euphoric, they don't see it as a problem, right? So there's a loss of insight. Almost all thought disorders, the loss of insight is part and parcel. It's almost a symptom. A new world is being created by your own thoughts and experiences which doesn't align with reality, but for you it is real, right? So reasoning in those situations doesn't really work. And I'm going to say something controversial, which is going to get me into a lot of trouble here because it is being recorded. But in those situations, you really do not have a choice but to, and I'm choosing my word carefully, insist and force the person to get treatment. And there are legal ways of doing it. So for substance use problems where a person doesn't have insight, in Florida there's an act called Marchman Act. So family members can actually go in front of a judge, say this person has a serious chemical dependence problem, substance use problem, they're not getting help, they might die, and the judge can force a person to go get treatment. Some of you might be aware of Baker Act, which the whole idea of a Baker Act is to have a person be evaluated. So getting a person to a place where they can be evaluated for 72 hours. Unfortunately or fortunately, it's a tricky situation, right? So outcomes of schizophrenia in this country are worse than in most developing countries, is because luckily in this country there is a freedom of choice to not accept treatment unless you are at risk to self or others, right? So a lot of people, they can live with their illness until and unless it gets to a stage where they become a danger to self or others. In most developing countries, family can insist, they can put the medications in food, and I'm not saying that those are the things you should do, but there are those strategies that families use so that outcomes actually tend to be better. But one, sort of insisting, not taking no for an answer in terms of they're getting help, not worrying about hurting the feelings, because it's a serious situation, it can be deadly. Just like you will not take no for an answer if someone is having a heart attack and refusing to go to the emergency room, you're not going to take no for an answer. So that same phenomena applies, and in worst case scenarios, you can utilize the law. There are legal pathways to get help. So if your parents are unsupportive of therapy and other treatments, how would you manage your mental health disorder? This one's definitely one. Well, I honestly don't know what kids can do. I guess they can go to their school counselor. That would be one option for them to seek help. They can talk to their pediatrician. Most of the time, beyond the age of 13, 14, pediatricians will speak with the child separately from the parents so they can express their distress to them. Those are two pathways that I can think of, but maybe Dr. Muller will have the right answer.
We cannot use the new 811 number.
988, the suicide hotline?
Yeah.
So there's a new suicide hotline number, 988. It's for crisis. I guess the person who asked the question went more in terms of ongoing psychotherapy and counseling and medications. But there is a new suicide hotline number, 988, that is always an option. People who live in Ponte Vedra, Jacksonville Beach area, there must be other organizations, but there is one in particular that I'm associated with. It is called Peer Tomorrow. It is actually a peer support organization. So people who themselves struggle with mental health problems, they have gotten extra training to actually provide support to other people who might be struggling with mental health problems. So that's an option. Going to NAMI, I can't imagine how a kid would call NAMI. NAMI is a National Association of Mentally Ill, I believe. So it's again a peer-run organization. It's run by people who have mental health problems. So they have people, they train people to speak about mental health problems, and they run support groups and those sorts of things. So I guess you talked about communications. Other questions? No? Yeah.
Is there any specific local number that we can use for March Themselves? Is there a police station that we can call?
I think it's mostly the civil law, right? So we have to go to the judge's office, right? I'm not familiar with any particular number that you can call. I can look up if you find something. Anyone else? Come on. There are always more questions. They'll come up. If you guys do not ask questions, I will individually. Go ahead. Yes.
So Sadhguru believes introspection and overthinking is the source of anxiety and depression. I'm paraphrasing. What are your thoughts on that?
So let's first parse out the word depression in terms of communication. So are we talking about sadness about our circumstances that is reactive versus a persistent mood state that is now beyond changing based on how we are thinking or behaving, right? So I'll put the disease part to the side, because once it's a disease, once it's pervasive, it's persistent, and it's severe enough where you cannot think your way out of it, then you need treatment, right? You need intensive psychotherapy, you need medications. So then there is a question of whether introspection or overthinking is a cause of anxiety. One can argue it is. On the other hand, anxious people overthink, right? So let's think about it. So remember I put there's a mood area of the brain, emotional area of the brain, and then there is a thinking area of the brain. Then there is, based on our genes, based on our experiences, there are certain cognitive constructs that we create about ourselves. And I'm again treading in Dr. Goel's domain here. But there are certain rules, just like mathematical rules, there are certain rules we follow about ourselves. I'm good at this, I'm bad at this, I'm not good at anything, I'm awesome at everything. Those rules can be anything, right? And then based on rules, we interpret the information that we are getting, right? So the example I used of a book, I went to two extremes, the kid who gave up the book and the kid who didn't read at all and submitted the report the night before. But there is a big category in between. It's like, if you work harder, you could have done better. So let's say that this person starts to overthink, reads the book, writes a report, gives it to 3 people for feedback, gets very different feedbacks, spends the whole summer writing the book because he or she is very nervous, whether the report is correct or not. So one can say, Either this person had a basic rule, I am not good enough, I need to work harder, which causes distress, anxious distress, and that actually drives a person to do more, or it can just take one more step where that anxious distress is so extreme that a person is not able to function. And so that's where that boundary is variable. There are certain things about which we can handle. Coming up here, nervous, but yeah, I'm now talk for half an hour, not feeling anxious anymore. On the other hand, I could have had a panic attack sitting there, and I can't be here, run away, right? So now my emotions would have gotten to an extent where I would not have managed them, and I would have engaged in the behavior of running away that would have then confirmed the information for me, this is scary, right? So next time I will overthink, next time I'm more likely to get anxious, next time I'm more likely to run away. So that's how those patterns develop. One can also argue that introspection actually leads to anxiety and distress reducing. If I understand this about myself, and I say, okay, hold on a minute here, this is all playing out in my head, I can go up and speak, and then a new piece of information is registered in my brain that this is not dangerous, so next time it will become easier. So it depends on what that introspection is. And it's not easy to say, it's a chicken and an egg situation to a certain extent as to whether the excessive thinking led to distress or distress led to excessive thinking, or some combination of both of those. So, one of my slides was on complex gene-environment interaction. You can spend a whole afternoon talking about that. But one example I use for people is because there's this whole psychiatry realm, blame the mother. Sorry for all the mothers, but for a long time, much of psychiatry was issues with parenting. Most of the time, parenting being defined by parenting dialogue. But here's the way to think about it. Let's say that two identical twins are born. In fact, same mother, they look the same, exactly the same genes, but one of them has fallen. Alright? It's more cranky. And now one of two things can happen. That the parents of this child are either very loving and caring, so they fuss over this calling the child, and they ignore the other one who's calm. Or they might be cranky, so they're more irritated with this kid, angry with this kid, and are more loving towards the one who's not loving them. So let's take a moment and think about what happened here. Did the environment change the person? Did the genes change the environment? Both, right? You can't really tease it out, and that's the challenge. In all of these problems, except for the most serious mental health problems, where really there is a chemical imbalance. The environment has got nothing to do with it. Across cultures, it's fascinating that a completely illiterate person in deep rural village of India will say, something has been put in my head and people are controlling my thoughts. You might get a more refined version of a chip being planted in the head and my thoughts are being controlled. But the experiences are same of schizophrenia, irrespective. Experiences related to bipolar II disorder, same, irrespective, right? The storytelling might change a lot. If I'm grandiose, if I have special powers, I will use my religious cultural themes. I might say I'm Hanuman, God, power, in Hindu religion, and I might say, I can walk on water, and that's a special power that I have not. But those remain the same. That's the most fascinating thing. The presentation might change with the basic experiences. All this other part, which can be addressed by psychotherapy just for that reason, because you can modulate. Brain is a very adaptive organ. You can modulate one part of the brain. If you can think differently, if you can behave differently, your emotions will change. Emotions you can't change, right? You can't snap your fingers and say, I'm not feel happy, feel sad. That's largely autonomous. That's a motor area of the brain. But thoughts and behaviors you can regulate, and then your emotions change. So that's the whole psychotherapy piece. It works in a different area of the brain. Meds usually work in that whole autonomous area of the brain, so the combination always has better results than either alone. But again, I will leave aside serious diseases like severe bipolar and schizophrenia, because psychotherapy really can help cope with those issues, having a serious illness, but it doesn't help the core illness itself when you need medication.
So much of, considering so much of this is about chemical balance in our bodies, a lot of students who are 13 and 18 are going through puberty and life changes, and so it seems like these types of challenges may present or exacerbate. Could you help us understand that?
Absolutely. So, great question. The disclaimer that I will say is you don't really fully understand exactly how these hormones interact with moods and thoughts. But especially in women's life, three parts of life are especially challenging in terms of mental health. So puberty, childbirth, and menopause, right? So we do know that those periods are specifically much higher risk of developing mood disorders, anxiety disorders. Exactly how those hormones interact is not clear. So there are some psychiatric illnesses where we know for certain it is related to hormones, like the premenstrual dysphoric disorder, where 4 or 5 days of her period is going to start. There is low mood, irritability, it could be anxiety. If it's really, really extreme, I've had patients who would experience consistently suicidal ideation during that period of time, and it will pass. Like a dark cloud comes over and then it passes. So clearly related to the phase of hormonal changes, but we don't fully understand. There are a couple of large studies done in Australia where they found that oral contraceptive pills are associated with higher risk of depression and such, but there is some Swedish data that says, well, they're actually protected. So we don't really fully understand exactly what formulations, the challenges that they all have, slightly different estrogen and slightly different progesterone, things like that. It's a difficult thing to regulate. So those periods, one can argue, are periods of change also. Not just from a neurochemical perspective and hormonal perspective, but also from a perspective of asking questions about who I am, what am I going to do. So they coincide both of those. So specifically talking of teenagers during this time, certain things are common. One is there's a certain sense of impulsivity. So somehow the baseline emotional regulation is a little more challenging, right? If I have to say what the core issue is, that emotions are experienced more intensely. Not by every kid, but the majority of kids, that change happens, right? And so of course, if you're experiencing a particular emotion more intensely, your behavior will change, you will react more intensely. So I think what the grown-ups around these kids need to do is to bring the temperature down. If you're going to bring up your emotion to the same emotional plane, there's only going to be heat. There's not going to be any light generated, right? So that's an important piece to recognize. It's an interesting concept. All of us have a different baseline emotional energy, right? I use that example of a light. For some of us, the lights are turned up. For some of us, the lights are not turned up that much. So people for whom lights are turned up have more intense emotional experiences. The world actually looks different to them. The world actually looks more distressing or more amazing based on whatever that current emotional state is, right? So they might want to do more things because they are feeling great. You are the restricting force, like, come on, no, you can't do that, this is dangerous. Or that emotional state is more anger, right? They're frustrated more easily and more easily angry. You can't match that with anger and frustration. And please don't feel bad. As a psychiatrist, I have problems with my daughters on a daily basis. So easy to say, huh? Just kidding. So, but that's essentially it. That if you take a moment and say, okay, my kid right now is at a stage in life where, because of neurochemistry, hormonal changes, stage of life, they are experiencing everything more intensely. You can't match that intensity. You just have to calm down and slow down yourself.
Better understanding of how they are behaving.
Well, start by understanding how your behavior affects your child, I guess. Sorry if I'm being offensive here. But start with yourself, right? Start by asking yourself, what is it that I'm doing that is so annoying? Of course, you can say, I'm not doing anything, I'm the parent here, but you are. And as I said, part of it would be whether you're listening or problem solving. Part of it would be you matching the intensity of that emotion with your own emotion. Are you feeling distressed because in a very age-appropriate fashion the child is killing you so that they can become their own independent person? This is the sentence I use with my own kids almost on a daily basis when they tell me how how big of an idiot I am. I tell them totally age appropriate, you have to kill me to become your own person, otherwise I'm in the all-empowering governing force and I have to be put down, right? I have to be literally killed for them to become independent. So start with yourself, that's the first thing. The second thing is saying it out loud, right? Communicating. Saying, I'm not saying what you're doing is wrong, but it's making me scared. It's making me sad. It's making me angry. Which is another communication thing, right? Have you ever seen a South Asian person say, oh my God, that was so exciting? We don't use words. It's like we are excited. You can see it. I am sad, I'm crying. So our emotions are more expressed emotions. They're not verbally conveyed. You have to say I'm feeling sad. It's a sad situation. It's understood, the other person. But here, the kids actually learn to convey emotions in words. I am sad. I am excited. And after being 15 years in this country, still doesn't make any sense to me. The person standing there calmly saying, oh my God, I'm so excited about this. Don't look like it, but yeah. So that's another thing to consider, that conveying your emotions to them in words, that's a communication skill to learn, and that comes in very handy because that's how they are thinking about it and they are expressing it. Okay. Well, okay, this okay, let me take a stab at this one also. What if parents are the same? And that's a common problem, right? That parents have a different relationship with the child. The parent might think that the child is healthy and it's like that. And he or she is fine. This time around, everything will be okay. I think that the parents need to sit down and talk to each other without the child being present. And come to an agreement as to what needs to happen. The most important part is what makes the other parent disagree with the idea of getting involved with the child. So, lots of different cultural and communication skills come into place. One is, bring the parent here so that they can learn that mental illness is not a sign of weakness, or experiencing distress where you actually need to go out of the family. Right? So, culturally for us, mental distress, emotional distress is a sign of weakness. Either we have failed, or family has failed, or society has failed. It's a sign of failure. Otherwise, people will say, oh, I don't need help, I'm a strong person. So, that one is strength. Second, not that much of a problem nowadays, but oftentimes if it's related to personal relationship, romantic relationship problems and such, there is also a cultural concept of purity that applies more strongly to female children than it applies to male children, right? So there could be this sense that, you're washing your dirty linen outside of the house and that somehow changes the purity of the household, purity of the family members. The third one is people will find out, right? So we have a deep sense of shame about this, deep sense of stigma. So of course, that's another reason why a parent might not want the child to get help, because it will affect their quote-unquote future in terms of future marriage and relationships and things of that nature. So that's another reason. So the key thing is to ask the question, what are you afraid of? What is keeping you from taking the child to get help? And then negotiating a solution. The two third rails of these presentations, one is marijuana and one is gender and sexual identity. So let's think of a more acceptable alcohol. Right? So there are certain rules that define alcohol. One is you can't drink when you're young, because we know that the brain is still developing and the chemical will affect the brain. And similar rules should apply to any chemical, including cannabis. We know for certain that the trajectories of development in children change if they use marijuana, especially if they use marijuana, meaning they don't get to the same level of emotional regulation and intellectual functioning as would be predicted by, let's say, baseline neuropsychological testing. So I think, sort of very concrete about this, that people younger than 21 should have. Same rule that Then let's think about cannabis as a recreational tool. People drink alcohol, people can use cannabis, and it all boils down to how much. So we don't know, right? How much becomes dangerous and how much is okay recreationally. We don't have that data. Two, we don't know what kind of risks are associated. So we know that even 24 hours later, people's reflexes and such are not as sharp. So if I am going to be a passenger in a plane and I find out that I smoked some weed the night before, I'm definitely not getting on that plane, for example, or my surgeon for that matter. So there's that part of the challenge, perhaps higher risk of accidents and things like that, which goes represented alcohol too. The third part is marijuana is not a uniform chemical, right? So that's an important thing to recognize. There are so many different kinds. They can be 90% THC and 10% CBD, and there's 10% THC and 90% CBD. Or if you're smoking flowers, indica, sativa, various different kinds of hybrids. So the challenges with marijuana is one, we don't know what people are putting in their system. Two, we don't know what those chemicals do just yet fully. And third is, I always say it's never about the chemical, it's about the brain. People can drink a whole lot and they're fine, their liver is fine, their brains are fine. And then people are drinking moderate amounts of alcohol, their liver is shut. Or they develop all sorts of organic problems with their brain. And marijuana is not any different in that sense. So as a psychiatrist, I've seen so many kids now come into our emergency rooms with cyclical vomiting syndrome. So they're developing vomiting, which no one can figure out why it's happening. It's all related to marijuana. This is only happening in whatever way you define moderate and continuous use, but that's a concern. Two, we have seen enough kids now, whether it's marijuana or whether it's spiked with something in psychotic rates. So kids who are vulnerable to develop psychosis seem to be having psychotic rates of marijuana. So those are the risks. If you're going to use it as a medication, again, no one has studied, and whenever it has been systematically studied for anxiety or insomnia, utter failure, doesn't seem to help when put to scientific rigor. However, if you want to use it, I always tell people you have to define what is the composition, what is the dose, how often do you take it, and what is the target symptom. Okay. Once you have defined all of those things, you try it. If it's not working, you stop. Right? So that's what I'm thinking about it as a medication. You can never stop it. So who gives a shit? Right? So let's say that people think whatever they think. What other people think only has power if you give them that power. Otherwise, they can keep thinking whatever they are thinking. I'll say it again. Who gives a shit? So, sorry. Keep on. So, whoever asks that question, the key cognitive challenge is what? One, mind reading. Other people are thinking poorly of me or my family. We really don't know, right? We are mind reading. That's one. Okay. Two, we are giving, let's say that even if we have the ability to mind read and we are correctly mind reading that other people are thinking poorly of us, what value does it have? Right. Especially in today's day and time. If you are living in a small village where the village people can get together and throw you out of the community and you will not have a source of income, then it was important. I think we carry this from there, right? Especially in South Asian cultures. In today's day and time, you don't know your neighbors. Who cares what someone is thinking? Don't give it any value. Alright, what else? One last question. Well, let me answer this one. What if one takes a label of mental health seriously? Would they run the risk of playing victim all the time? Well, that risk is almost as big a risk as someone playing victim about having diabetes, or about having cancer, or about having whatever illness, right? But most of the time, people don't play victim. They actually don't like labels. And we don't need to use labels necessarily, right? We essentially have to look at it as someone struggling with significant distress, and there are particular kinds of distress and there are particular ways of addressing those distress. You know, if label helps them get help, why not? If labels are hindering, then we don't need to use labels. Okay? All right. I think I got my cue to stop. Those are all questions for you. Yeah. Sure.
Let me ask Dr. Chopra and Dr. Goldman you can use it somewhere. Nobody can share. I think later on we can know how they interact.
So all you have wonderful kids. It was a pleasure to sit down with you. There's a little hesitation, a little shyness, but I can give you some takeaways from it. I guess we were surprised. Our kids don't necessarily feel like we're going to listen to them, and they do feel like shutting down a little bit. And we talked about listening to each other. Again, it's not about parent passion, but it's about trying to figure out how to communicate in the best way. But I would say was the big thing. Feeling like your parents are not listening. So listening doesn't always mean agreeing, of course, but engaging with your kids and just allowing them to talk. And it's really, really, really hard as a parent because I'm like the solutions right here. And I supposedly know that I know all this knowledge, but that emotion is picked up so strongly. So I would say that was the major takeaway from there. And I would tell you where I think it's especially important. Our kids are being exposed to so much information through TikTok and all these other sources, and there's so much about mental health, communication, and personality disorders, and all kinds of things that they are aware of. We totally want the communication models to be as good as possible so that we can educate them, so that we can give them the information, because there's so much misinformation out there. Parents just don't know how. They're not going to take those and process all that, manage all that, and how to. So I think right now, keeping communication is more than ever for those things. That's the summary. The team for meetings is a whole time where we sit there and we just listen, try to understand. So the next 10 minutes, I'm not going to react to anyone that says we're giving them the opportunity to continue and pausing and then saying, I'll come back to you, so that we can manage our emotions and respond to them instead of reacting.
I think that was the question as to what are the strategies or practical strategies to avoid miscommunications and listening, right? Without making that question very friendly. Are you looking for a solution to start with? If you're ready, just sit down and listen. The other thing that we talked about was instead of suggesting solutions, eliciting solutions, asking them what would be the possible solutions.
And I think that goes a long way in helping them gain sense of self and self-esteem, because when we offer these solutions and react, we really do damage their self-confidence, and that's still developing. We want them to develop into people who can problem solve. So I think that it's absolutely so important to do that in this area.
The other thing we talked about was recognizing that we don't really fully understand their role, especially in immigrant families, and acknowledging that. I don't really know what is going on, so educate, tell me more about it, eliciting information from them. As to, we might provide solutions, most of the time they are not practical solutions that would work in their world, which we don't know about. So even if you suggest something as a solution, always start by saying, I might not fully understand it, perhaps these are the ways, these are the possible solutions to think about.
And I think it's really challenging to listen to our kids, not only because we're busy or we just whatever they say may or may not make sense to us, but it is so crucial. Sometimes you hear things you don't want to know, but really you have to know. You have to know. They have no time for my God, I wish I
but okay, at least now I have the information and I can help my child problem solve and figure it out. And I think as parents too, we sometimes fall into the trap of feeling like if we're endorsing their behavior or we're somehow encouraging it. And that's not necessarily the case, right? That's the point. When we listen, we build trust, and I think our kids are more likely to benefit from our guidance rather than shutting it down.
So, as a last point, what I would say is, don't be scared of asking, how is your kid feeling? And if you have any concerns that your child might be struggling, don't be scared of asking the question if they have any thoughts about hurting themselves, right? Asking never increases the risk. It actually conveys to the child that yes, this can be a real problem, and my parents can tolerate the distress, listen to it, and then perhaps we can come up with a solution.
Sorry, just one more point before we wrap up. One other thing that did come up, and this is probably a surprise to anyone, social comparisons. Kids don't like it, please don't do it. Try not to do it. I did talk to them about how to interpret those comparisons. If someone makes a comparison, we can use it to make ourselves feel angry or bad about ourselves, or we can use it in a positive way to motivate ourselves, or try to understand what it is our parents feel we need to do. But if as parents we can find a different way to relay our message, comparisons would be very effective. So I think that's understanding. I think we've all experienced it from our parents. We've got to put that to regret, but it's something to have in mind.
I want to say thank you Raghu for providing this beautiful space for us to organize.
Doctors are going to be here for a few more minutes, so if any one of you, if you do not have your questions answered, or if you'd like to have one-on-one quick conversation, we're welcome to do that. We have a couple more items before we wrap up, so if you could bear with us. I'd like to invite this young man, Saket, to come up and give the word of thanks. Saket?
Hello everyone, I'm Saket Krishnan. I'm this year's youth coordinator for Mount Sky. I would just like to thank everyone for the opportunity to be a mental health ambassador for the city of Jacksonville. I would first like to thank the doctors for coming out today and giving the insight on all our questions that we have. And I would also like to thank Mr. Raghu Mishra for providing the legal space. I would like to invite Dr. Manipuni and Mr. Seth to present the medical presentation.
Thank you all once again for coming. Thank you, Sarah, for coming. And I cannot thank Raghu enough for providing us this wonderful space and sponsoring for our Sky workshop. Raghu, would you please?
So this place, many of you know
So we got heartfelt thanks. Once again, thank you all very much. Have some fun. Thank you for coming. And courtesy Dr. Lena Boyle, we have some cookies, some calories, and of course, courtesy Shankar, we have a water also there. Please have it, and all of you can get. We have some books, small books, notebooks. If you want to recollect anything that you heard, we can note it down. And have some history books. Once again,
you want to see more events like this?
You want to see more?
We want to see more events like this.
It's all your support and our mission. We've done few seminars in the past, and repeatedly as Dr. Cohen says, and we all say the same thing all the older generation. Please listen more than we talk to our kids. Thank you. And whatever is good to them. Thank you.